Hey Darren, it's me Dan, and in this video I'm gonna try and help you solving the issue that you had in regards to how do you create two vertical lines going through the center of your website. Okay, I know there's several solutions to this and they are probably all okay. I've chosen a solution that I find the best if we think in terms of how you would actually build your website. Okay, so before we get started with the coding, let's just try and focus on what we actually want to create here. If we imagine that this white document inside this Photoshop file represent the website, so everything around it is basically just background color to the body, nothing special, nothing that we really want to work with. So inside this frame, being the white document, we're gonna have text and images and navigation, etc., etc. But before that, we're actually gonna have two major sections, okay, dividing the entire website up into a left section and a right section based on these two vertical lines. Okay, so if we say that we have two vertical lines, being the first red one here being the first one, we have a section to the left of it, and the second vertical line, we have a section to the right. So we're not going to have any issues with text or images that's being added to the website being, you know, in the center of this, because we are just not going to have anything inside this little gap here, because we're not going to have any containers being influenced by this little gap. So this section is one container and this section is a second container. Okay, so at least that was, you know, the way that I would create it. Unless I'm completely wrong, you know, you can always just tell me, but that's what I'm trying to create here based on what you draw. Okay. Yeah, let's get started. Enough talking. Into the coding. I actually cheated. I created the index HTML. I haven't added any code to it, but I linked the CSS file. Okay, and again, I have no code in my CSS, so everything is just from basic. So we're going to create the frame now, and we do that by creating a container. So div id equals, and I'm going to name it wrapper because that's what I like. I'm going to have a tiny comment on this one. Something like this. So wrapper is our frame, that's the content basically. Inside that we're gonna have our two sections. I'm gonna name first one left, close it like this, there you go, and we're gonna have another container inside our wrapper named right. Like that. Okay, so this is actually all we need in order to create this. So if I were to inspect this source code, I would be nothing there because we haven't really specified any values or written any text, etc. So let's go into our main CSS here. We add the little star tag, meaning any container or elements on our website have a margin of 0 pixels and a padding of 0 pixels. And why are we doing this? Well, some elements, some lists do have default values. So by adding or applying the values of margin and padding 0 pixels, we just reset them, making it very easy for us to style them and specify any position that we would want without having the default values fucking it up for us. So this is always a good starting point. Okay. Next thing is now we're going to refer to our container wrapper. Do it like that with a little hashtag in front of it and the container curly brackets start and end. I'm going to give it some easy numbers. So we're going to say width 1000 pixels like that, and a height of 800 pixels like this. Okay. We are also going to give it a margin of saying auto. So we center our content. I'm going to give it a background color also. I'm just going to give it a symbol yellow white-ish color. Hit F5 and now we can see it. I do want to have a little gap from the browser to the actual content. How do we do that? Well, we know that margin works with dimensions, and if I haven't specified any dimension in my code here, if I just written margin, then it would automatically think that I am trying to tell all the dimension within this code. If I wrote margin top, then it would only focus on my top dimension. Since I wrote margin here, I can actually just go in and say margin 20 pixel and then auto, which means that first dimension will always be top, second dimension will always be right, third dimension will always be bottom, fourth dimension will always be left. So first dimension 20 pixel top, meaning that from the top go 20 pixel down and then center all the other 3 dimensions. Hit save, hit F5, and you can see now that we created this little gap here. Okay. Next thing is that we are going to create our 2 sections, saying first one is named left, and again they are containers as well. We're going to give it a width, and we're not going to give it a width of 500 pixels. And why is that? Well, if we look on our Photoshop file, if I were to give these 2 sections a width of 500 pixels, I wouldn't really have the gap between them. So I'm just going to give them something less than 500, something simple, 490 pixels, okay, like that, and a height of 800 pixels. And we are not going to change the background color. Let's just leave it for now. But what we are going to do is we're actually going to add the very value that is actually creating this vertical line, and that's border. But instead of just writing border, we are actually only going to specify one of the dimension, which is border right. We're just going to give it 1 pixel. You can always just add as many pixels that you would want, but for now 1 pixel is fine. Solid, and for the color we just choose black, like this. Okay, we hit F5 and I've created my vertical line. Now we're also going to create another vertical line, so just duplicate this container and name it right. And since this section is supposed to be to the right of the left container, I can't really give it a border right, I need to give it a border left. And hit save, and let's try and see how it looks. Well, it completely fucked up everything. And why is that? Well, that's because we haven't really positioned these 2 containers within our wrapper. How do we do that? Well, we go back to our container left and tell it to float left. Okay, let's try and do that. You see, now I can see that my container left with my border right is in position, but my container right is not in position. It's being read as just go in behind my container left, which is why we now have the border left in our left section, if that made any sense. The 2 containers actually standing right here. Well, how can we actually do that? Well, we could probably just add a float left, right? But then we would have a new problem. Then the 2 lines are just, you know, they are up against each other, because section left has a border right and container right has a border left. So they're just hugging each other now. We don't want that. So what do? We give it a float right, obviously. There you go. So now we created the gap. Since we do know that we have a width of 490 pixels on our first container and 490 pixels on our second container, leaving us with 20 pixels left, but we're also taking 1 pixel from our right dimension and another pixel again from our left dimension, leaving us only with 18 pixels left. So we have 18 pixels of gap between these 2 sections here. Okay, nothing can come across them, because anything that we write within these 2 containers would never ever exceed, go outside this frame unless you tell it to. So this is a really simple way of you building content on this page, having these 2 vertical lines without, having the problem of creating containers which is then, overlapping your vertical lines. You kind of want, as I'm thinking this, you want the vertical lines to be like lines where you divide the content up, as I see it. Otherwise, tell me if I'm wrong. So what can we actually do to this? Well, right now, let's say that, well, we don't really want the vertical line to go all the way up or in the bottom. We kind of want a bit of a gap in the bottom dimension and in the top dimension. Well, what do? Easy peasy. We go into our, let's just take the example of our left container here. We change the height because we know the maximum height of our website is 800, and this section is also 800, but we don't want it to be that. We want it to be 700 pixels, because then it gives us 100 pixels to work with, saying we are going to deduct 50 pixels in the top and 50 pixels in the bottom, leaving us with 100 pixels in total equals 800 pixels total of height. Did that make any sense? I hope it did. This is easy numbers to work with, so try and follow here. So what happens if I just save this? Well, the computer reads it as it's supposed to. It floats up top left, and then it deducts 100 pixels in the bottom. So we want to center this vertical line. How do we do that? We could probably go inside our left here and say, well, what happens if we write margin top 50 pixels, which means from the top dimension, go 50 pixels down. Solved. Like that. We can do it the same thing over here. And then we created our two vertical lines. And now we are ready to fill in some text. So, Darren, I really hope that this little video tutorial solved your problem. Otherwise, you can always come and ask me again, and I'll try and help you. Okay? So take care, dude. See you.